All right, hello class. Here we are back with our next 1600s, 1700s author, Mary Astell, and the excerpt of hers that we read from uh, her A Serious Proposal to the Ladies. All right, that's her bigger work, and we read an excerpt from it. So, Mary Astell, very interesting life. Again, excuse my background, I'm lacking that room of one's own that Virginia Woolf writes about how female writers or writers in general need a room of one's own to be able to write. So, in my large household of 10 people, I'm lacking that room of my own right now, and I am in a closet, about the only place that no one is in my house. So, I'm in a storage closet. Yes, here we are. So, I am creating a symbolic representation of the conditions that so many women have struggled with, right? To be able to write. Anyway, we've got several interesting web links in the lecture, the written out lecture, where you can get more information about Mary Astell's life and also see some of her other writings. Okay, so you might want to check those out if you'd like to know more. So, Mary Astell, she lived from 1666 to about 1731, to the age of 65 about. She was the daughter of upper middle class merchants in Newcastle, England. It's up in the north of England. Her father died when she was 12, so at 18, she had to make her own way in life with no property for a dowry or a marriage. In fact, Mary never married. She moved to the Chelsea section of London, where she made friends with numerous aristocratic women who became her patrons. A patron is somebody who supports an artist or a writer. They pay for their living because they like the work they produce so much. And remember, it's back to that Virginia Woolf, a room of one's own, and also a way to support yourself. That's how you can write. You can't write if you're spending all your time trying to make money to live or trying to manage a household every moment of the day. So that support from her patrons enabled Mary Astell to be able to write. So Lady Mary Wortley Montague, whom we are also studying this week, actually became one of her patrons. She's one of those aristocratic ladies who became a patron of Mary Astell. In the work we read here, an excerpt from her larger work, A Serious Proposal to the Ladies, which was published in 1694, Mary Astell proposes that women from intellectual communities where they can study the proper fields for ladies from the proper sources and where they can befriend each other and learn in an environment unfettered by the influence of men. So she's proposing this intellectual community of women where they can study all fields of education and they can have resources, right, and not be kept from them the way they are in society at this time. And they don't want to be influenced by men. They'll be by themselves. And so that's why this is a serious proposal to the women, to the ladies, that we band together and form these communities. Her proposed community sounds akin to the women's colleges that sprang up largely in 20th century America, where, they formed these women's colleges. Well, in a large part because women weren't allowed to attend men's colleges, but also with the idea that women without men, at college or in this community that she proposes, women can speak their minds freely. They won't feel pressure to conform to certain norms because males are there. So it's just another form of freedom to enable women to be able to think and study and write and compose in the way that they would if they didn't have to worry about societal pressure, and here in particular from men. So, Astell contends that the normal pursuits and studies of women do not develop women as women's potential would allow. Nor do these customary female pursuits make women interesting or even worthy of the gifts with which God bestowed them. So those are some of her arguments that women form these communities because because they will make women more interesting if they can be opened up to study whatever they want. And also, they will not be neglecting God's gifts. God gave them gifts for a reason, intellectual abilities and talents and natural affinities. And if society doesn't continue to pressure them to neglect some, they can develop these wholly and robustly. So the talents can be used to benefit women and society in general if they are unfettered by those normal social pressures. Seemingly conversely to the modern reader, Mary Astell later argued for the natural subordination of women to men in marriage. So interestingly, Mary Astell didn't get married. So maybe she thinks, oh, if you're in that traditional arrangement, you're subordinate to them. So I guess I won't get married. Maybe that was her thinking. We don't know. But she vehemently argued for the equality of single women to men. Interesting. So she stayed single, right? Yeah, she never married. Of course, not marrying at the time was highly unusual. Highly. But of course, Mary's lack of a dowry would make it undesirable to men of her social status. They wouldn't want to marry her because there was no dowry. That was kind of like a bribe to that the woman's family would make to the men so that they would marry her. It's just all part of that like arrangement. Like, arranged marriages, they were all kind of about political influence or money, property, and things like that. So, anyway, Mary's writings made her a woman of accomplished reputation, which would seemingly substitute for the lack of a dowry. However, she still never married, right? Whether that be by choice or by circumstance, we don't know, but she didn't. So anyway, this is a really interesting read, her serious proposal to the ladies. And it takes that Garden of Eden motif of women as the temptress, women as the sinner, and turns it on its head. And it's very interesting how Mary Astell does that. She turns it on its head and uses it as an argument for women to learn and form these communities because of their innate and primary desire to want to learn, one that even preceded men's desire to learn. Very interesting. She takes that Eve Adam dynamic, that Garden of Eden myth that, or I don't call it a myth as in I say that it didn't exist or happen. I just say it's one that has been promulgated, that has the Adam and Eve story that has been used to argue so much against women's rights and so much against women being educated. And she reclaims that story, turns it on its head, and uses it as an argument for women to form these communities because of women's innate desire to learn. One that pushed them so that they violated the commandment and ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as women quested for knowledge first. That's what Mary Astell argues. So do enjoy reading about Mary Astell's life and her A Serious Proposal to the Ladies excerpt in the anthology that we read this week. All right, thank you and enjoy.